My name is Rana Abdul Hamid. I'm the ED of Malikah. It's an anti-violence organization primarily. So we are focused on two issues, gender violence and hate-based violence. And we also, so the way we address those things is we do programs. So self-defense, healing justice, financial literacy, and political organizing programming is our main focus. Last year, though, we opened this space. It's only been open for a year, which is wild to think about. And it's become very much a mutual aid hub in this neighborhood. So we do food insecurity work, we do housing work, we do candle making workshops, we do art programs, we do all the kinds of things that bring our community together, which is like very special and exciting. And I'm actually born and raised in Queens and born and raised here in Astoria. So have been here my whole life, which feels really special. And I love this place. And I really love being able to share the history of this neighborhood. So there we go. So does anybody know why this neighborhood is nicknamed Little Egypt? The specific name of the neighborhood actually came from the fact that the first restaurant that opened here was Egyptian. That was like non-Italian or non-Irish. The chef who opened the restaurant is called Chef Ali Sayed. He opened a restaurant called Kebab Cafe. Has anyone been to Kebab Cafe before? Okay, well, I highly recommend that you go. Chef Ali is like probably 80, but he's like much older. He's an elder in the community. His restaurant is probably the size of this hallway. So it's very much a hole in the wall. And he built that restaurant with a lot of love. The reason that inspired him to create that restaurant was that when he came to the United States in the 80s, he felt like anytime he was looking for Egyptian food, people would point him to Mediterranean food, or they would point him to Middle Eastern food. And he was very adamant that there is a difference between North African cuisine, Egyptian cuisine, and Mediterranean. Like, it's just not broadly Mediterranean. It's not just not broadly Middle Eastern. And there are different foods in both of those categories. And so he wanted to create a restaurant that was very specifically, you know, making a nod to Egyptian culture and Egyptian history and Egyptian food. You'll see, for example, Levant is Palestinian and Yemeni owned. Al-Quds, even though the food that they serve and the management is Egyptian and Tunisian, and the workers are all North African, it's owned by a Palestinian actually, which is why it's called Al-Quds. But you walk in and it's not Palestinian food, it's literally all Egyptian food. So you might be like, why? It's because the management and the history of that shop is actually, it used to be Egyptian owned. And you'll see actually as we walk down, there's even like a Palestinian. Has anyone ever had ziyara before? Ziyara is known to be like the best shawarma in New York City, and it's very tasty. So we can go there right now actually as our next stop. So you'll notice that there's a Palestinian flag on the restaurant. What makes this restaurant, what makes this location also really important in this moment is obviously everything that's happening in Palestine right now. A lot of people feel here in this neighborhood in particular that they're able to be political, right? Explicitly. Like they could have a Palestinian flag where maybe in another neighborhood you might not be able to do that in New York City and feel safe doing that. And so a neighborhood like this becomes really, really important, especially in moments where people are feeling, you know, a lot of grief and a lot of mourning, a lot of sadness, that they could fully express all parts of their identity. And even when you walk into the store, you'll see like a lot of Palestinian paraphernalia, a lot of things that really nod to that culture. So one of the big things that this neighborhood is also known for is its nightlife, and also its day life, I guess, if you're an uncle and you're smoking shisha at 9 a.m. A lot of shisha, we call it shisha in Egyptian culture. Shisha is very, very popular and has become popularized because of the nightlife in New York City. You'll notice that a lot of the older, the OG shisha spots, they will have a sign like this. They want to make it clear that this is a spot that's friendly for those who might not feel comfortable around alcohol, who don't want to be in the presence of alcohol, who are practicing Muslims, who don't want to be, you know, in that kind of location. So a lot of the community here is Muslim. So there's like a couple things I want to point out. The first thing is that the majority of Egypt is a Muslim majority nation. 90% of Egypt is Muslim, 10% of Egypt is Coptic Christian. Okay, which is the indigenous Christian faith community that exists in Egypt. The majority of Egyptian immigrants to the United States are Christian. So there's less of a Muslim majority Egyptian community than there is a Christian community. However, the majority of the Egyptian community here is Muslim. Okay? So this is a Muslim majority community. You might be wondering, why is it? Why is it that the majority of people who are Egyptian who come to the United States are Christian? Does anybody know? Because of persecution, right? They're fleeing the country. They feel more safe in the United States. And it's easier for them to also access visa and paperwork because of that as well. The majority of Egyptians here are Alexandrian. They are not from Cairo. And they will take pride. They will tell you, like if you're like, where are you from? They won't say, I'm Egyptian. It's kind of like New Yorkers. They're like, I'm from Alexandria. So the majority are from Alexandria, Egypt, because the first US embassy in Egypt was in Alexandria, actually. And then they moved it from Alexandria to Cairo. So it's much easier and much more accessible to people in Alexandria. That's one thing. The second thing is that Alexandrians are very close to the Greeks. All of my mom's neighbors when she was growing up were Greek people. They're like, this is my family. They're all like super close. We're the same culture. We're besties. That's how they vibe. And the first largest kind of immigrant community that was here before the Egyptians was Greek, obviously. Our food is similar, our culture, the music, the vibes, the energy, a lot of intermarriage too. And so when you think about family reunification and families migrating together, that chain of migration is also Greek people who lived in Alexandria. So even the person who's the landlord for the building that I'm in, he's Greek, and his family used to live in Egypt. So when I was growing up, getting halal meat was very difficult. So if you're maybe a Muslim who's been here for a long time, you might remember people would have to go out of state to get halal meat. My dad actually opened the first halal butcher shop in Astoria. So I was in that restaurant, in that shop. It smelled really weird, but here I was with the meat. But back in the day, there wasn't like all these restaurants that you can go to and just grab halal meat, grab fatir, grab what you wanted that reminded you of home. The other thing that there wasn't that was very difficult for people to find was modest clothes, right? So in order for you to practice modest wear, what would you have to do? You'd have to go to like Macy's, buy a jeans, put it on pants, buy 3 shirts, layer them together, figure out a scarf that you'd sew together and make it longer so you could wrap your head. Like that's literally what our elders had to do in order to practice modesty. Now you can go to Urban Modesty and you can walk in and go to one of their pop-ups and buy clothes. So our beauty products, our hair oils, we can find them here when before you couldn't really find them, you would have to import them. The third reason that someone might come to and need a community like this is because of religious institutions, which I'll walk you down to the mosque, which you can't see actually. Can some folks see it? The minaret, the pink mosque? They want to be close in proximity to retain their cultural heritage, to retain their language, to retain their religious identity and heritage for the next generation. Before the 1980s, most of the Egyptians who migrated to the United States were migrating either as Coptic community who was migrating to the United States or as scholars, academics who are coming to continue their education. 1980s, you see a lot more people who are migrating because for economic reasons. This is how you have a working class community that is in search of economic opportunity, and their main goal isn't actually to come to the United States and settle, right? Their main goal, like my dad was trying to marry my mom, his college sweetheart. That's literally what he's trying to do. He was like, I'm coming to America, I'm gonna work for 3 years, I'm gonna be out, I'm gonna make the money, be out, right? So they come, literally work 18-hour days. This is how they were working, with the hopes that they would save enough money to then be able to resettle in their country. Of course, that changed a lot because of the political situation in Egypt, which just kept getting worse over time. And so that is how you get this wave of immigrants into a community like this. Not just from Egypt, but also from, where else? I told you guys. Morocco, Algeria, exactly. Because the whole region is dealing with that same kind of challenge. Mumbar, so you see the outside, everybody see it? It took him, Chef Mustafa, is an artist and he's a chef. It took him 7 years to do the outside. If you notice the iconography that's on there, you'll notice that there is a column on the right? The Greco-Roman pillar. That is a symbol of the fact that he's from Alexandria and he wants to make a gesture to his Greco-Roman heritage as someone from Alexandria. You'll notice a lotus flower, which is the flower of life for Egyptians. You'll notice the Eye of Horus, which protects and wards off from evil eye, which he has on there. And then you'll notice on the top, Islamic design. On the very top, those stars, it looks like Islamic heritage tiling from the North African region that you might see, for example, if you're going to Lisbon in Portugal or Andalusia in Spain. That's where that comes from. So this was all in an attempt for him to really showcase his heritage, showcase his identity. The Al-Iman Masjid is one of the earliest mosques that were built here. The first mosque that was built in Astoria by Egyptians is actually Al-Bir Masjid, which is off of 30th Avenue station, off the N train. Right now, that area is called Little Bangladesh. It's a majority Bangladeshi community. But historically, it was majority Egyptian. So still the imam and the person who runs the mosque is Egyptian, but the majority of congregants are Bangladeshi. Okay? So yeah, that was our first mosque. It was opened in the 1980s. And that's where like we had Sunday school, we had Arabic language classes. This opened, I think, in the late 90s or early 2000s. And they just built this school over it during the pandemic. They were building it. So it's a K through 6 school. They just enrolled, the first enrollment was last year. And it's a private school, full time. So it's both secular education and religious education. So you learn the Quran, you learn Arabic, and you do like all your math, sciences, etc. One of the really key moments in our community's history was obviously post 9/11, right? I didn't want to start with that, but it is something important for us to keep in mind and to be aware of. Why is post 9/11 an important time for our community? There was a lot of bigotry, hate crimes, there were a lot of hate crimes and Islamophobia, a lot of surveillance. So if you go into Kebab Cafe today, you will see the demographics unit poster with his restaurant on it. He puts it up there as a reminder of the fact that his restaurant was a potential location hotspot for potential Islamic radicalization. What were some of the signs that the NYPD demographics unit said were potential signs of radicalization? Large gatherings of Muslim people. What else? Going to the mosque frequently was a sign. What else? Wearing a hijab was a sign. Having a beard was a sign. Speaking in Arabic was a sign. Praying 5 times a day. Eating halal food was a sign. So literally everything I do was a sign. Except for a beard, I don't have a beard. But you know what I mean? So all of these were marked as signs by the NYPD of potential radicalization of the Muslim community and of the community that was here, right? So what did they have? They had different informants in our mosque, in our cafes, in our hookah lounges, in our restaurants. And these informants were meant to gather data. There was a report that was released in 2014 by the Associated Press that revealed this. Some people on college campuses were also surveilled. Some of those people successfully sued the NYPD because of this. And so it was a time in which there was a lot of discontentment and a lot of mistrust. Why? Because if you're someone, I don't like you, then I could go tell the NYPD, oh, I don't like this person, they did X, Y, Z. Guess what happens to this undocumented person? They get deported. This literally happened. Even if they have nothing to do with anything. It's personal beef. So people were turning on each other, there was stuff like this. People were undocumented, were disappeared. People were detained arbitrarily. So it was a very hard time. It created a lot of mistrust between the community and state institutions. So to this day, this street is not, for example, involved with the bid. Is not, for example, engaged politically very highly as other people might be. And so there's a lot of trust building that needs to happen that is happening very slowly. But over the past year, we've been trying, especially as Malikah, to try to kind of extend our space and presence in a way where we could be more unapologetic. One of the things that we did, for example, was get the adhan to be called out loud. Does anyone know what the adhan is? The call to prayer. It was very important for people in this neighborhood to have the call to prayer to be put out loud, called out loud, was because they had a void, right? If you lived in a country for 35 years, 30 years, you heard the call to prayer 5 times a day, and then you go to a country where that's not existent, you feel like you're a really essential part of your identity is hidden, is not unapologetic, is not unapologetically seen. Now we get that here. The last tour, actually, we got to hear it. It played as we were doing the tour, which is really sweet. We did Ramadan street lights last year for the first time ever. So we closed down the street for a night market during Ramadan, for suhoor. So slowly, we are trying as a community to really be present, to be visible, to take up space, so that not only are we creating this space that's like for us where we could feel safe, but also we can invite others to understand who we are, what we are about, why our community is so beautiful. So our elders did the work to actually build the foundation. Even with the little money they had, they were like, it's important for Rana to learn Arabic. It's important for her to know she's Muslim. It's important, I'm Rana. It's important for her to know that she needs to be proud of her identity. They did that, and they did that effectively. And I feel like our generation is, how do we preserve this in the face of gentrification? And how do we showcase it also and invite people into it?